Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the 3-Star Rift Clear series. This series is coming to a close, but there are still a couple of segments that we need to go through before we call it quits. And today we will be doing our second run through of the Omega difficulty rifts. We'll be looking at a total of 5 different segments today, and they will be the 5 rifts that are up towards the left-hand side of the screen in kind of that sideways V formation. So if you're excited about the rifts that we're looking at today, please feel free to hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe for more daily content. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the rifts of today's video and what you need to be aware of in order to get the 3-star clear in each of them. The first rift that we will be looking at is the level 61 Rush rift, where we need to defeat 50 enemies or more in Wakanda. This has a 4-minute timer on it, and as the title suggests, the end goal and objective is making sure that we clear out this rift while defeating 50 enemies or more. Now, there are a couple of things that make this a little bit of a challenge, but it is very much manageable as long as you're aware as to what is to be expected from this rift. First, of course, we need to make sure that we get through the rift with that minimum clear condition. The second is making sure that we can deal 7 million or more damage with abilities, so using abilities and synergy attacks work really well for this and making sure that you get into that clear condition area that you're needing. And then the third criteria for getting the full clear is defeating 80 enemies or more. Now with these types of rifts, I do recommend using characters that can bunch up and cluster the enemies that we're working with. And Thanos Infinite does very well with that with his Gravity Surge. In a pinch, you could also use Cable, as you can even synergize Cable's attacks with his Gravity Surge with other members of your team to assure that you aren't needing to switch off of different characters where Thanos Infinite is incapable of synergizing with his team members, at least not in an in-game built-in synergy, though he does make up a very good component of any team in about 90% of the circumstances in which you would be using him. So you see that we're really just employing the same technique where we will rinse and repeat the different attacks that we are dealing out. The rhythm that I've gotten into is placing that Gravity Surge by Thanos Infinite in the center of the arena in which we are competing, and then layering into the enemies that are bunched up with synergy attacks as we do so as well. One important thing to note about this rift, as you have seen with a couple of the messages that have popped up as we've been running through it, is that your damage output and damage received will increase every minute that this rift continues. But at the end of the day, that really just helps you get to your overall 50 clear condition, as well as the clear condition of defeating 80 enemies in order to get that 3rd star. We're coming into the last minute here, and we're easily going to hit all of those different criterias. So the only other thing that I'm taking advantage of at this point is making sure that I can replenish my energy for continuing to rinse in a couple of these synergy attacks. Black Panther and Wolverine tend to work very well together based off of the attacks that they throw out and the way that they work with each other. There are a couple of mini-boss characters that pop in periodically throughout this fight, but they do not play into the clear condition of this particular rift. We're down into the last minute, and the only other thing that may help you in taking out opponents if you do find yourself struggling is there are these energy crystals that are dropped by the elemental mindless ones as they come through, or the energy charged mindless ones. So if you really are in need of some additional damage output, those crystals may very well serve to be in your favor and benefit. We have just the last couple of 10 seconds, 15 seconds here or so, and what I will do to just cap that out, because it's nice and fun, is we'll go ahead and detonate our extreme attacks because we can, and they look pretty fun as we do so as well. So that'll run out the timer here, maybe get us an extra KO or two, But that is going to do it for the first segment in the rifts of today's video. Moving right along, we actually have a solo rift, which is the level 65 solo brotherly battle rift and difficulty. This one tends to be pretty fun because Thor is a character I don't use a whole lot, but he has some powerful attacks and can be quite fun to use as he dashes around the arena, swinging Mjolnir and throwing out other lightning attacks from him. The main things that you need to keep in mind for this rift is getting through the rift at its minimal clear condition, which is defeating Loki, and that is the main Loki boss here that has popped in. The second criteria is defeating 10 enemies over the course of this fight, which can be done easier based off of the Loki shadow clones that come in to this fight as the battle progresses. Specifically, once you have the main Loki into the second phase of the fight, he will summon in up to 3 shadow clones at a time. The last criteria is dealing 270,000 damage or more with abilities, with as frequently as you get to recharge your different attacks, you should be able to meet that condition pretty easily as well. As an added benefit, Loki and the shadow clones do periodically drop health and EP replenishment orbs, so those can be quite helpful when it comes to assuring that you are meeting your criteria. Just don't burn Loki down as quickly as you may want to until you have had an opportunity to defeat 3 different rounds of his shadow clones, because that will give you 3 by 3, which is 9 different enemies defeated, and since Loki, the main boss character, does count as an enemy defeated, that will get you that 10-person clear condition. I tend to gravitate a little bit more to the attack where Thor will swing Mjolnir around and then charge forward in a straight line, which can be directionally influenced to a certain degree as you attack into the opponent in the general direction that you're charging it. But at the same time, the attacks do quite well in their general scope as long as you're aware of it. As you see there, we were able to take out 2 of those shadow clones in one fell swoop. There's at least one more rotation of the shadow clones that we need to make sure that we wait on in order to get the full clear condition for those enemies defeated. This version of Loki, he will make things a little bit more difficult as we progress through, but honestly, layering into him with just a couple of basic attacks is more than enough for us to keep up with the damage he's outputting. We do have the last round of these shadow clones, or at least the last needed round. I'm sure that we can have or could see a couple more of them spawning in, but this will get us to where we need to be at the bare minimum. And with a couple of other heavy attacks where Thor is throwing Mjolnir around, we are able to knock Loki down and his different shadow clones there, and then progress into attacking into him as the final resort. You should be familiar with dodging around attacks at this phase as well, so even though Loki has a lot of attacks that can hit pretty hard, you will be happy to see that that is something that you can avoid as long as you plan accordingly. With just 1 or 2 more hits, we will have Loki taken down, and that will be all we need to do in regards to claiming the full clear conditions for this particular rift. Thor is not looking super great at this stage, so we'll do 1 final dash attack, and that takes out the remaining sliver of Loki's health and gives us that 3-star clear for this difficulty. The last 3 rifts of today's video are actually going to be a little bit quicker based off of the nature of how they are. This one is going to be a level 65 wave style rift where we need to defeat 200 enemies in Wakanda. This entails making sure that you are defeating at least 20 powerful enemies, which honestly is kind of a cakewalk based off of the enemies that spawn in. The majority of the enemies that spawn in are just the basic grunt style, but there are plenty of the mighty enemies that spawn in as well. We also need to make sure that we get through this rift in 3 minutes and 10 seconds or less. But again, this is going to be an area where you would be greatly aided by taking out the different opponents by using the gravity surge type attacks, as well as relying on a large area of effect or heavy hitting synergy attacks from the other members of your team. As you see here, we are approaching that 3/4 of the way mark or margin here, and at this stage, just to get the remainder of the enemies, or a good chunk of those remaining enemies, taken down, we will be detonating our extreme attacks on top of the different opponents in the vicinity, and then layering in the last wave of enemies that we need to take down with that final gravity surge from Thanos Infinite. The fourth rift that we will be looking at today is a level 67 Ultimate Rift. This is entitled Modoc Mayhem, and though it does mean M.O.D.O.K is the primary opponent, there are a couple of other grunt enemies that pop in here, and then Claw will actually make an appearance as well. Those are the two main boss characters in this section that you will need to take down in order to progress and claim your rewards. In order to get the full clear condition here, of course, as always, you need to make sure that you meet the minimum clear rewards of defeating the bosses needed. You'll also want to make sure that you can get through with one or less teammates taken down or incapacitated over the course of this fight, as well as getting through the fight in 4 minutes and 40 seconds or less, which is very easily doable as long as you are familiar with the attacks that your opponents can throw out, the stage that you're combating them in, and what opponents you need to focus on in order to get out of this particular rift. You'll see here that M.O.D.O.K has kind of boxed himself into a corner, which is kind of conducive to our benefit in terms of taking him out as quickly as we can. So with one final set of the heavy attacks there, M.O.D.O.K goes down, and then Claw is not too far behind, and layering into him with a couple of heavy attacks will leave him in a similar fashion. That brings us to the fifth and final rift of today's video, which is the level 71 Ultimate Death and Deception Rift. This entails a lot of mini-bosses, kind of in the back-to-back format, that you'll need to focus on and take down. We actually start with Mystique, and then transition over to the Destroyer Armor, and along with any appearance from the Destroyer Armor, we have a couple of grunts that spawn in with the Rainbow ISO 8 effects. Though it is an interesting difference to note that this time they are AIM soldiers rather than Hydra agents, but I suppose that doesn't break the bank at the end of the day. After the Destroyer Armor goes down, or shortly there before, we will have an appearance made by Maximus. And Maximus is quite the glass cannon of a mini-boss character, so you should be able to take him out with relative ease as long as you're able to dodge around the laser cannons that he has. As Maximus goes down, there will be a small wave of grunts that spawn in, which will then trigger in the arrival of your next opponent, which will be Cole Obsidian and Ebony Maw as they spawn in together. These two are pretty straightforward. They do have their Infinity Stone attributes active, but you should be able to take them out completely if you have your extreme attacks online, to which you will be greeted with the final boss of this wave in this rift, which is Supergiant and her Mind Stone abilities. She's pretty straightforward though, although she can be a little bit difficult to get a read on with how she tends to dart around the battlefield. All you need to keep in mind for getting the full clear conditions here is finishing the rift in 5 minutes or less, and getting through the rift with no teammates incapacitated, and you'll be able to get the full 3-star clear in this criteria. And that is going to do it for today's video. If you found today's video helpful and or enjoyable, please feel free to give me a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more daily content as I have videos coming your way every single day. Thanks again for your time, and I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day.